to today's webcast, IT security priorities for 2021. So many things have changed, though the basic building blocks of security remain essentially the same. We continue to learn new tools. I'm going to share some information that you may or may not know from recent security events. The bottom line, the purpose of everything we do with these webinars is to help educate, and that's certainly our goal today. We offer security products and services, but many of you in attendance, you're already PBSI clients, you're using most of the services, in some cases all the services that I'm going to talk about, but for those of you who are not, this is not an attempt to have you move from your current IT, it's an attempt to educate. So today we're going to review some recent security events and briefly interpret what we think that means. We're going to talk about the overriding security framework that we all should have in place and the 9 essential elements that are really quite definable. And then we're going to do a deep dive into 2 of those in particular. One is securing remote connections. It's an issue that many of us are interested in, and hopefully everybody who's listening has already secured all your remote connections, but what are the things that need to be done? What things might you consider doing to increase that security? And we'll do the same thing with email security, which is the source of so many of the most common attacks that have really impacted organizations, and we'll summarize. So we'll finish in half an hour. Thank you for joining. For those of you who aren't familiar with PBSI, some of you in attendance, this is your first exposure. We're a technology services provider. We have 300 plus clients in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And as CEO, I'm blessed to be able to say that the large percentage of our staff have been with us for 10 years or more. We've continued to add staff as we've grown. We try to add people of the same quality and mindset of helping clients succeed. But I know that knowledgeable staff helps clients. We're an active learner in the area of security, and from what we've been learning, we'll share some today. So why do we need protection? The details of this change, but everybody understands you wouldn't be attending today's webinar if you didn't understand we need protection. You really are, quote, the smart people in the room, because many of you will already know most of what I'll talk about today, but it's what we can learn that we're all interested in. So we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of cyber issues that have actually occurred in small businesses. I think we all have understood that it's not just large organizations that are being attacked. It's automated attacks that find whatever they can find, and the recipient of the attack is more frequently a small organization than large. Malware is transforming faster than we can keep up with. 350,000 new variations per day, and that's because the attackers have learned to morph the attacks with each attack, leading to zero-day attacks, or what's called 0 days, which means we have 0 days to prepare because there's been no attack that looked exactly like this one before. Things change with the attempt to bypass security. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Antivirus products that are looking for signatures, depending on how radically the attack is morphed, those can be bypassed. So there's danger. Recently, most people by now, it's been all over the news, have seen evidence and information about the Solarwinds Orion security hack that has been proven to infect an increasing number of organizations, Microsoft, Cisco, many US government agencies. If you're a PBSI client, please know we use Solarwinds products, but it's a completely different product. Solarwinds is grown by acquisition, shares no code base, no support base. In any event, we've taken the steps to make sure that all clients are protected. But this is really a bigger picture. Solarwinds is not, it's the name that's publicly associated. But what we've been learning is that there are several tools you see listed on the screen here: JetBrains, TeamCity, Sunburst, others. Teardrop just came out in the last couple of days, where it's learned that software products that were used by SolarWinds were compromised in advance of their use. The cleverness of what was done can hardly be overstated, and you see exactly that stated by anybody who knowledgeably talks about it in the press or the IT community. Just one example, JetBrains, one of the components that SolarWinds used in their development, is used by 79 out of the Fortune 100. So what does that mean in terms of their ability to do the same thing to corporations directly that they did to SolarWinds? And this JetBrains was founded by 3 Russian engineers in the Czech Republic. So I'm not pointing fingers. One of the things that took place, I read an article that Microsoft did an amazingly proactive and huge change. For the first time, they put a kill switch in Windows that specifically for SolarWinds, but for other potential attacks, allows them to make a change relatively instantaneously to be able to block at the base level at every endpoint attacks that happen. So it's just another example of the huge effort that continues to go on in the give and take of attacks happen, defenders morph. Just this week, Ubiquity, widely utilized Wi-Fi and networking product, which we use, great equipment, announced a hack that required password changes. So we went straight about every PBSI client, your passwords have all been changed. These are things that there's no way any of us can know next week or the week after that which vendors, which products will be announced that they've now been hacked as well. So what we're going to talk about is, so what do we do in light of all that? Just today, or excuse me, just yesterday, it was announced today, the Federal Circuit Court, since they'd been affected by the SolarWinds hack, has made the decision to keep all sensitive docs offline. No longer can you get to them online. And that's a pretty significant thing. Many of us use the cloud for storage of documents. I have conversations with clients all the time about, should we use the cloud? Is it safe? And the answer basically is, yeah, the cloud's safe. You follow some certain guidelines and protect sensitive documents in a certain way. But here's a case where now there's reason to question, how safe really is it? So yeah, maybe you are a bit frightened. That's not my intent, is to frighten, but basically it comes to this bottom line. Modern security must be multi-layered. Multi-layered security has been the foundation of what we do for clients and what the security world does for clients for a long time. And it simply means you can't depend on any one particular component of your defense to work 100% of the time. Now that hackers are targeting software developers, that's what we're looking at up here. These are all tools used by software developers, some of them security software developers. What can we do? And the answer is, we must make sure we have multi-layered protection, and we need to focus on prevention. We can't ignore prevention just because we might say, well, prevention isn't 100% secure. Well, that doesn't mean take away your firewall or do away with your antivirus. But we also need to make sure that we've got adequate detection and response tools in place. So that's pretty much what we're going to focus on. This, there's more content than I'm going to be able to cover in 30 minutes. So I'm going to breeze over some of this. Feel free to ask questions in your chat box or separately by email, because we're happy to dive into more information. But NIST is one of, there are a handful of well-established cybersecurity frameworks. HIPAA, there are just many in different industries, and GDPR, there are different frameworks, but they all share most of the same common components, and they center on identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So identify means take stock of where you are. Know what your assets are, where's your technology, what kind of technology, have you done a risk assessment? We can help organizations do this. We've done it for dozens of clients, probably more than dozens. So where is our risk currently? Then protect. This is where we set access control. We'll talk about this today to make sure that we have very tight controls over who can get to our network and our devices and our data. Train our staff, make sure our data is secure. And these are the things that are the bulk of what most time is spent on, and that's protection. Detection, though, have logging that takes place for anomalies and events, which we do for clients. Continuous security monitoring is the foundation of what we do, and we know we get more than dozens of alerts per day, which we deal with on behalf of clients, where something happens, we turn it off, we fix it, we make sure it's not in place. But if that monitoring isn't taking place, then the question is, how do you know whether your devices are secure? So it's a big, important component. And then respond. What are your preparations for response? Part of that is backup, and what is preparations have we done for recovery? And we'll talk a bit more about that. But this is the basic essential framework that is established by any widely published security organization. So the essential attack surfaces. An attack surface is something that potentially could be accessed. So what we want to do is prevent access to our attack surfaces, and we want to make sure that they're protected. We want to make sure we can understand what's there and remediate if we need to. So the first, and two of these, remote workers and email security, are in a different color because I'm going to do a deeper dive into those two topics today. These others I'm going to cover in more summary version simply with this slide. So our perimeter, where within four walls, now most of us with home workers and so forth, we have perimeters that extend beyond our four walls, but inside of our four walls, regardless of how many buildings we have a firewall that protects our internet, and we have Wi-Fi that exposes our organization to the outside. So particularly with the firewall, it must be sent to run silent so hacker pings don't get an answer when they ask, what version of Windows Server are you running? What version of Windows Desktop? What version of Office? We must set those to not respond, which isn't a default mode on all devices. We only open permitted services. When we set up a firewall, it's very simple. It just requires the expertise to know what to block and what to permit. We do things like, and it's really important that, of course, we have clients with international organizations, so we make changes to this, but we want to block with geo-IP filtering things that come from IP addresses outside of the country. And that immediately takes care of a lot of the most significant and voluminous serious hacks. So perimeter needs to be secure. Our data needs to be secure. We store data on our servers, and some of you have servers in your offices, some of you have servers in the cloud, some are hybrid. But it's also worth mentioning, and I don't probably do this frequently enough, some of you have data on your PCs. So we advocate that every client have a policy that says no organizational documents on my C drive. That means my desktop as well on my PC. And yet we know that lack of understanding of where things are stored, people feeling like, well, I'm the executive in the organization, I get to play by different rules and I'll store things on my PC because it's confidential or whatever. There are all kinds of places and times where people do store things on PCs. Please don't forget that you need to protect that data as well. So anyway, the basic idea, though, for most of us, it's servers or cloud data, that we follow basic important backup principles where we have redundant backup that includes multiple local copies, multiple online copies, and hopefully if you're a PBSI client, your servers are protected with EDR, endpoint detection and response. SentinelOne, it's a product that they say you can't get ransomware on a device that's protected by SentinelOne. They being the vendor, we supply the software, we set it up, we monitor the alerts. But think about multi-layered security. What would happen if, in fact, that software vendor were hacked and that promise didn't happen? That's why multi-layer security exists. So it's important, and this is pretty much basic for everyone listening, protect our data. Endpoints, these are our desktops and our laptops. This is where an employee sits down at a workstation, and increasingly might include iPads or iPhones, but those are less susceptible. Macs are certainly included, I should say desktop Mac, laptops or Macs. The basic blocking and tackling, we need to have antivirus, patch management, which means a process to automatically update and notify us for, usually it's PBSI if you're a PBSI client, to deal with patches that fail so that all security patches are updated when they're available. Really important that we have our devices set for vulnerability scanning. If there's antivirus on a device, usually that antivirus will do vulnerability scanning sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. We have this set for all clients, but when we start talking about home PCs, then this becomes more a question mark, and that there's alert monitoring in place. So make sure our PCs and laptops are protected and that there is remediation software in place. So you have antivirus there so that if an infection takes place, I make a bad click, I have an unupdated security patch that's used by somebody to hack in, I've made a mistake, and so now my PC is infected. Antivirus has to sit there in order to deal with that and try and mitigate it, stop it, minimize the damage. It's a part of multi-layer security. So I'm going to skip remote workers and email because we're going to dive in a minute. Another attack surface certainly is our employees, and we want to do some things to prohibit unknowledgeable employees from being able to mistake that hurts the organization. I'll talk about Microsoft 365 and the click protection, that even if an employee clicks on the wrong thing in an email, we're made safe by having the right tool in place. But you can't protect every behavior, especially web link clicking. There's really no fail-safe way to protect that. Employees are going to make mistakes. When there have been isolated cases of successful spear phishing, I hate to tell you, but yes, occasionally it succeeds. It almost always comes from a hacked email where there wasn't multi-factor authentication turned on. One email in the organization was used to find out about other emails. All of a sudden, the controller's getting an email or sending an email to the CEO saying, please authorize this transfer, and the CEO doesn't know that both email addresses have been compromised. I mean, it's you have to get inside before you can start attacking successfully. So the various kinds of training, we use a product called KnowBe4. All PBSI employees go through this, where we regularly train on different topics. We fish test regularly, and we have testing. That's available to clients, $3 a month per employee. That can vary based on size of organization, but excellent product for training. And that does HIPAA training too. So anyway, another attack surface is the increasing proliferation of IoT devices, the Internet of Things, IoT. That includes some computer equipment, routers, but mostly it's referring to devices that we don't typically think of as IT equipment, TVs, cameras, thermostats, refrigerators, Alexa. We all could probably tell stories about how Alexa was listening and things happen, and we thought, well, how could that possibly have happened, where I got an email on my phone related to something I was just speaking about that Alexa heard? Anyway, how do you protect these things? The answer is really simple. It's make sure you don't use standard passwords, change your passwords on all these devices, and update your firmware. So I'm going to make a generic statement here that I won't cover elsewhere in this presentation, and that is to update firmware on your devices, go to the manufacturer's website, search for updates or firmware, find your device, and download it. That usually means you need to register your device, but there are plenty of examples where attacks take place where various kinds of devices are found to have a security flaw. And if a homeowner doesn't know, or an office who uses an electronic thermostat that's connected to the internet doesn't know to check the firmware, they can go unprotected. And that's why I'm mentioning this here. Our internet connected devices need to be protected. Okay, then disaster recovery plan. This isn't an attack surface particularly, but it is something that we need to have this plan in place where we've assessed and communicated and published what our plan is. Do employees know if the internet was down completely on a day, who they should call, and where documentation is stored, and all of that needs to be prepared in advance, because on that date, and I'm making this up, when Russia shuts down all of our energy grid and our internet goes off, and oh my gosh, there's been a serious attack, how do employees know what to do? So that's having a disaster recovery plan that's considering the security of the organization. And then finally, but this is really ongoing, be aware of our own security. So any PBSI client, we do your online security monitoring for you. So we know the status and we get alerts and we monitor these for all of your devices. But if you don't have that kind of thing in place, and this is going to go to home PCs, how do you know if your security is working? So the basic ideas, these are clear and simple. I'm going to focus now on two topics: remote workers. What do we need to do to protect those connections? And email security. So first, remote workers. The basic blocking and tackling here is not difficult. These are the required action steps on the left. So first of all, we need to make sure every home PC that is used or laptop that's used to connect into the office, we should require that they have a paid antivirus. There are free antivirus products, and having a free antivirus is better than none, but free antivirus products are free generally because they sell customer information. And that just, I can't tell you about a free antivirus that's resulted in hacks, but also how would we know? How would we know where information comes from? So it's simple and inexpensive, and in some cases you might choose to supply. So if you're a PBSI client, you have home workers, if you want to supply your PBSI antivirus and monitoring software to your home workers, just let us know. We did discounted work and a lot of times free work for home PCs to help everybody in this COVID time. So infected PCs create a risk. If you have an infected PC at home, and that includes a malware that does key logging, well, that key logging can be capturing keystrokes and capturing all the passwords, and then all that person needs to do is log into the internet and, or excuse me, log into the office, and no matter what other protections we put in place, that person now logs into the office and the attacker comes right along with them, sharing all the permissions that that person has. So it's hard to overstate the importance of making sure that you start a remote connection with a PC that's secure. Okay, I think this is understood. You need to have a VPN, virtual private network. This encrypts traffic to and from. And the best way to do this, it's simple, is use a VPN that comes through your firewall. So typically, we support different kinds of firewalls, but we typically supply SonicWall firewalls. There are VPN client licenses. And interestingly, that is used in conjunction with a Microsoft free product called Remote Desktop, RDP. Every PC and every Mac comes with RDP free. RDP creates a secure tunnel from the home PC to the device they're connecting to, typically the office PC. So if that creates a secure tunnel, why isn't that enough? Why do we also need a VPN? And the answer is that we want to make sure everything comes in through our firewall and there aren't people who are connecting in. I mean, theoretically, a user in the office could set their PC to permit remote connections, and they could go home and access that remote connection, and they're going from home to their office PC and never go through the firewall. You don't want that to happen. That's why it's important to control this, because then all the firewall settings that you've put in place are completely obliterated. Those defenses are non-effective for anybody who's got a non-standard connection. So require a VPN, require standard connection software, because your firewalls have to be set to not open remote desktop ports to the public. I can tell you stories about where this hasn't been set that way and some security issues that resulted from it. So antivirus, make sure remote connections use a VPN and standard connection software. This is the training topic, unless a home PC is connected to your domain. A little bit separate topic, but home PCs don't have to be connected to your work domain. If a home PC is not connected to domain, you can't prohibit them electronically from saving their login password. But at PBSI, I log in remotely through remote desktop through our firewall, and I've tried. I can't save. I didn't try to do it. I tried to test it. I can't save my login password to the office. No matter what I try and do, our settings on the firewall won't, or on our domain won't permit that. So if you can't electronically prohibit it like we do at PBSI, and we could help you do it as an end user, then prohibit it by training. Don't store your logins. On a laptop, you store your login password. That laptop is stolen. They have your work connections. So it's pretty standard, but it's important. And a lot of times we just don't think, we haven't taken the effort to communicate to our staff about how these things need to work. Set account lockout. This is something we do standard for every client, where it doesn't have to be 3 incorrect passwords, but user will get a message. If you have one more password left, make sure you try this correctly, or contact your administrator or PBSI if you've exceeded your maximum. But you need to have a limit on incorrect passwords, because password attacks are frequently initiated from home PCs. And that's related to this item below. Close ports on your home PC. we recently did a port scan on all the home PCs at a client, and we did so because there was one home PC that was reporting 30,000 failed logins. Well, 30,000 failed logins, rightly so. We immediately became concerned, client became concerned. Well, it turned out that the home PC had open ports that permitted an outside attacker to get access, and they were attempting 30,000 times to get into the security on that PC. Fortunately, the PC was secured in its connection to the office, so that never tried to get into the office, because if it had, those 30,000 would have been limited to the first 3. So it's a simple thing to do some standards on home PCs, and if you'd like, let us know. We can send to you a summary of how you protect your home PCs. Passwords, another big thing. It's not really just related to home PCs, but please make sure that staff are informed. Don't reuse passwords. And separately, don't use work email on personal sites. Because if I store my work email in a reused password on Amazon or on Target or whatever personal site, and that gets hacked, then the keys to log in, my office logins, have been released. So simple but important. And again, make sure Internet of Things firmware updates and passwords are changed. This is a training thing with end users. And then one of the things that you might consider is having PBSI do the monitoring of the home PCs that are a part of your network, as well as the work PCs. So the big picture here is, if you thought of a circle or a box that is the 4 walls of your office, that's your perimeter. But now your perimeter is extended to include every single PC that connects in. And if one of those devices is compromised, they pass their credentials right on through to the attacker. So it doesn't do a lot of good to have the best security in the world on your 4 walls on your firewall if you don't extend that to home users, which is why the focus on this topic. It's certainly important, and hopefully everybody listening, you've already gone through this, but the purpose for today is to make sure we publicly communicate. Here are some things that are important. Okay, second and final deeper dive, and that is security settings on email. So there are a couple important things here, and we're almost done, so I'm going to be brief with this. But hopefully, if any of you have attended a PBSI webcast on security before, you've heard me talk about what used to be called ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. It's a $2 a month add-on to Microsoft 365. Now it's called Microsoft Defender for Office 365. I don't know why Microsoft decided they needed to change the name, but anyway, same thing, same product. If you have, quote, ATP, you have Microsoft Defender, because we supply it to every single client. And whenever I encounter prospective clients and I ask the question, so do you use ATP or Microsoft Defender? A high percentage of the time, the answer is no. And I think, how could that be? It's such an important security product. This is the product that if you click on an attachment or click on a link or open an attachment in an email, that goes to Microsoft's sandbox in the cloud and is fully exploded, and the user, instead of getting malware, simply gets a message that says that was a malicious link. Okay, another thing, this is a corporate-wide setting, and there's some pain and some work associated with this, but Microsoft strongly suggests, and PBSI the same, that you set your Microsoft or Office 365 to require multi-factor authentication. So there's an authenticator app, or you can get a text. There's multiple ways where the multiple factor occurs. But this is really important, and what happens is many of us have received an email from a client or somebody else where we know that it says there's an attached invoice. When we get that, we know, oh my gosh, this is a scam. How did this come to me? And it's coming from one of your vendors or one of your customers, and your immediate thought is, holy moly, what's wrong with their security? This is really bad, because this invoice that I just got is going to put a virus on my PC. Well, how did that happen? How did you receive that? And the answer is, typically, one email was hacked, and they were able then to hack another, and multi-factor authentication basically prohibits, it makes certainly 99.9% more difficult the hacking of an email, because you can't take over somebody's email unless you have both devices. You have their iPhone or their phone as well as their device in order to take over their email and be able to access their contacts and send out an email. So there's a second related, there's something in 365 setup called a transport rule, and we set this for clients to block auto-forwarded emails. We didn't used to do this, but we found enough cases of what I just described where you get the quote invoice that is really a malware-laden document. In order to block the ability to do that, there's a standard feature that's set to enabled called auto-forwarding, and by disabling it, you make it much more difficult for an attacker to do that. Then briefly, synchronizing your 365 email list with your domain controller has all kinds of security benefits. It simplifies the task, and again, PBSI can get involved to do this for you. We try to do this for every client if you have a domain controller. And what it essentially means is that when you add or remove an email, it both deals with the 365 and it deals with your security of your network. And so access control, when you remove an email, it also removes access control from your network. Pay attention to security settings on web mating tools. Don't use email that aren't at my domain. I can go into more detail. A lot of people do, and it's not the worst thing in the world, but there are good reasons to go to an @my.org domain instead of using a Gmail or whatever. And then for those of you not using 365, if you have an in-house Exchange server, I'd strongly suggest you consider now's the time. You save money, it's more secure, there are all kinds of benefits, and it's really quite cost effective. So we have run out of time. I'm not going to do a demonstration. I will quickly just summarize. So what we've talked about is secure your perimeter, secure your data, secure your endpoints, train your employees, protect your network, and some of these things, hopefully everyone's gotten at least something today that you can take away that says, okay, this is something I need to ask more about, or I need to find more about, or how can PBSI help me? If you're using a different IT supplier, feel free to contact them or contact us. We have a lot of expertise, and we can help. So we can help with 365 and Microsoft Defender. We can help with ransomware protection, Nova4 training, security monitoring, backup, home PC port scanning. Ask us if you'd like us to do this work. There's a fee associated with doing this because it's fairly laborious, but it's also something that has some security benefits. And with that, we're finished with content. I want to thank you for your attendance, and I hope everyone has a good day.